Well, everybody's assuming that Rahm Emanuel left the White House to run for mayor of Chicago. Not so, according to some out there. Dr. Charles Dunn, he is a former Reagan and George W. Bush appointee. He's a professor of government at Regent University. And I believe he thinks that old Rahm was maybe shoved out the door. Dr. Charles Dunn, how are you?
I'm doing well, and trust you are too.
I'm doing very well. So you think he was pushed, eh?
Right now, President Obama is rock bottom with regard to his job approval ratings. Rahm Emanuel was not a big help to him with regard to that. His brash, aggressive style, confrontational, adversarial, did not help President Obama. So I think this was a pleasant exit for both. Emanuel wants to become mayor of Chicago. President Obama needs new blood in the White House. So shall we say this is a divorce of friendly convenience.
And how bizarre is it that they give him a dead fish on his way out?
Yeah, right.
That was just strange, wasn't it?
Right, right. But turning the table on this thing, this is now a big national event for President's Chief of Staff to return to Chicago to run for the seat held by the Dailies for so many years. And, of course, the Washington pundits believe that Emanuel is the odds-on favorite to become the next mayor. But in Chicago, they say, not quite so fast. So Chicago critics find that, Emanuel's brash style, distant relationship to the Democratic machine, weak connections with community leaders, inadequate ties to the large blocks of black and Latino groups, and a religious faith outside the predominant Roman Catholic faith of most Chicago mayors in modern history. Those all render him vulnerable from the standpoint of the Chicago critics. But the way I look at it is Emanuel can overcome the critics' charges. He can exploit tremendous fundraising capabilities that no one can match.
And he'll probably have Obama come in to campaign for him, too, wouldn't you think?
Oh, yes, and we have to look at it this way. President Obama may lose his Senate seat to the Republicans in Illinois. What an embarrassment that would be going into the 2012 election. So right now, that's a neck-and-neck race. Obama needs to pull out all the stops for Rahm Emanuel to win the mayor's seat in order to help him, Obama, prepare for and win re-election in 2012.
But first he's going to have to overcome this little nasty little item that he's not a resident of Chicago. My understanding is that he has to have lived there for a year, and they can't claim that he's a resident because he was living in Washington, D.C., and he was renting his house out. So how's he going to get around that?
Well, the old political saying, where there's a will, there's a way. You recall Bobby Kennedy moved from Massachusetts to New York and got elected. At least Emanuel can claim tangential residence in the greater Chicago area, and he did represent a U.S. House district that went into the city of Chicago. So he does have some claim to that, but if you're looking at his foes, like the Cook County Sheriff, and the Sheriff of Cook County has an enormous machine countywide and, of course, in the city of Chicago. That's an issue that he and others will raise. But looking at it from Emanuel's standpoint, the more candidates, the merrier. So Emanuel will begin with a block of support in those liberal enclaves of the old Gold Coast, Lincoln Park and that area, and in Hyde Park around the University of Chicago. So for him, he needs to branch out from those liberal enclaves and to indeed become a citywide candidate.
So you think the Rahm, and I know the press folks, and of course one person says this and they all like to say it, he's got sharp elbows. In other words, this guy plays rough when it comes to politics. He may have rubbed some people the wrong way in Chicago. That may be hard to overcome, eh?
You're quite right. He needs to mend some fences, and that's why he has to exploit all of these other advantages. You have rightly put your finger on one of his most significant disadvantages. So, again, when you get into this matter of multiple candidacies, Emanuel's vote looms larger the more candidates there are dividing the opposition vote. So if you're Emanuel, you want a lot of candidates from the various ethnic, racial, geographic, religious, and political backgrounds, some of whom harbor animosity towards him because of his sharp elbows. But get him in the race and then allow his vote total as a proportion of the whole to rise above theirs.
Now, this race, this election is coming up in February. Is that right?
Yes.
That's not a lot of time to do all this. You say he needs to mend some fences and mobilize his base and get his machine going. And when all these other people have been doing this for years, it's going to be hard for Rahm Emanuel. I think he thinks he's just going to waltz in there and be mayor of Chicago. It may not be so easy.
If he thinks he's going to waltz in and do that, he better go back to Washington. This is not going to be an easy race. It's going to be his toughest race to win. I think he can exploit his advantages, and he can win, but he can't take anything for granted. One of the things he has going for him, as you rightly pointed out, this is a February election. It's an off-year election. Much of the national attention, as we're seeing it already, is focusing on the Chicago mayoralty race. So he's the figure that brings national attention to Chicago. He'll get a lot of support from people in Chicago who like the idea of getting that national attention. Plus, add this, the LaSalle Street community of lawyers and financiers, largely Republicans. Now, they can't elect a Republican as mayor, but they can look for someone with whom they can play ball on the Democratic side.
I didn't even know there were any Republicans in Chicago.
The one they can play ball with.
Yeah, I didn't know there were any Republicans in Chicago, so it's nice to know.
Yeah, get your microscope out. You'll find a few.
But Rahm, my understanding is, though, that some of the complaints coming from some people inside the White House, and this may be unbelievable for some people to fathom, but that Rahm Emanuel was too conservative for some people's taste inside the White House. He was the one who was trying to take a more moderate stance on some of the things that the president was doing. Is that correct, or is that a misread of who Rahm Emanuel is?
I think it depends on the issue. He apparently, for example, was one who opposed the surge in Afghanistan. That is, he took the most liberal position favored by MoveOn.org.
Right.
But on other issues, you probably are right. He is, I would say, a mixed bag with regard to whether he was most liberal or most conservative among the White House staff, which also bears on the point that you've made, sharp elbows. He has alienated people on both sides.
Right. So, and that's just the kind of guy he is. I mean, we go back to his comment where he was calling some of the Democrats effing retards, which he had to pay a little price for that and apologize for. But this is the kind of guy he is. He doesn't mince words, and he can get very nasty in the trenches, can he not?
Oh, yes. And that's the way you have to play ball in Chicago. That's what they respect. I grew up in Illinois. I was on the faculty at the University of Illinois in Urbana. I have friends inside the Cook County Democratic machine. I served as speechwriter for the president of the Illinois Constitutional Convention and counsel to the Legislative Committee. So my roots in Illinois and knowledge of Chicago go way back. And Rahm Emanuel can play ball with the toughest of them. But the question is, he's an outsider coming in. He's going to have to get an inside game and to cause the people of Chicago in these various groups, such as blacks and Latinos, to feel comfortable with him. Now, he's getting off to a good start there. He says, I'm going on a listening tour. Well, the media is hot after Rahm Emanuel right now. And so he is going around now, beginning soon, into these various communities. The media will follow him. So he's going to get a lot of free publicity, developing ties to these key voting blocks of blacks and Latinos.
And you're thinking this residency thing is just a speed bump. He'll overcome that fairly easily.
The likelihood is yes. You know, that's an issue that the opposition has to be careful in raising. It can become a sour grapes issue for the opposition.
Right.
Is it a legitimate issue? Yes, I think it is. Should it be raised? Yes, it should. But in the end, how far do you play that, especially with a fellow who was chief of staff to the President of the United States, who is from Illinois, and a fellow who represented a district that had a part of his district inside the city of Chicago.
Right. So that it may make him look like the victim, I guess. That these people are trying to keep him out of the process, and that they shouldn't do that.
Yeah. If I were advising Rahm Emanuel, I'd say, hey, encourage them to do that.
Right.
Just like I say, encourage all these candidates to run. That only helps my candidacy.
Right. So, but you don't think he's a shoo-in, though, right? Because
no.
you talked about the Cook County sheriff, and he has a little running. He's been running for a while, really, huh?
Oh yes. I mean that is the end of the rainbow for a Cook County, Chicago member of the Democratic machine. If you become mayor of Chicago with all the patronage at your disposal, you become the king. So a lot of people shooting at that, including the sheriff, and he's going to be out of the starting gate. He might well be down the track a little ways against the other candidates because of his organizational apparatus throughout the city of Chicago and all the IOUs that he has.
Right.
But this also, we mentioned IOU, the fundraising IOUs that Rahm Emanuel has. Go back to Richie Daley, the mayor. Rahm Emanuel raised a lot of money for him. So these IOUs in Rahm Emanuel's bank, he can start collecting on those.
Start cashing those in. All right. Dr. Charles Dunn, professor of government at Regent University. Appreciate the insight on this. It's going to be fun to watch between now and February.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed the interview.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being with us.
Okay, take care.
All right.